able to hear you unless you come talk to me.
Let's see here. I will hit the mute button.
Sorry.
No problem. I'm Chris Fabian. Thanks everyone for joining us for today's webinar. We're so fortunate to have Nick Kittle with us today to talk about innovation. We've been running a series of webinars. If you've followed along, we've had a couple with Shane Kavanaugh and GFOA, and the heart of those webinars with Shane were about scenario planning and really starting to look out towards the future in terms of how a recovery might shape up. And for many of our organizations, we're starting to work our way through the first round of strategies to survive here in the short term, and even buy some time to understand how this could all play out. And as we all start to begin thinking about the next realm of strategies, it occurred to us that for so many of our organizations, we're going to have to be dealing with programmatic change and different ways of doing business. And it was starting down that path that Nick came to mind. Nick has experience, certainly from his time in local government and afterwards as he consults regularly with local governments across the country, across the continent, and probably across the world. And Nick is especially practiced and good at creativity. And as we are really looking at unprecedented times and really trying to open our minds to explore new solutions for the type of reductions that we might be facing, I thought it would be a great time to bring Nick into the conversation. Some of you might have seen Nick last year at our annual conference, the Resource X Summit in Denver, and his philosophy, his way of working is quite electrifying. This is a Zoom meeting, so we're going to do our best to bring Nick live here from those beautiful mountains in Arizona. But Nick, I want to turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being here and working with our folks, and look forward to what you're thinking about.
Well, thanks for having me, Chris, and thanks everybody for joining today. I appreciate it. It's a lot of time to carve out about a topic that's personally very near and dear to my heart. I assume that's why you're here as well. I think that what Resource X is helping folks do is really understand what this next level of the waves look like and getting ahead of the planning curve. And I think that's where we're all trying to live at, is how do we get ahead of this? And so what I want to do is share some techniques today that I've experienced in terms of how we can get ahead and some things that we can do to hopefully stay ahead, but also talk about some of what's going on right now and maybe just provide a little bit of framework for how we adapt in this type of environment and why innovation is the right formula right now and what that looks like a little bit. So with that said, there's not a lot to be electrifying when you're doing a Zoom meeting through a camera. So I got this really amazing background. We're coming to you live from Sedona. So you really don't want to see what's behind me. It's kind of a tragedy. So let's just come with me for the ride. All right. I'm going to share my screen and my presentation here, and we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to accelerate innovation in a time of crisis. Can everybody see that okay? Can you just give me a thumbs up if you got that? All right, good deal. Don't want to be halfway through with a bunch of tech issues, you know what I'm saying? So with that said, let's talk about this concept of accelerating innovation. And I really want you to feel free to be active in the chat too. Some of the stuff we're going to be talking about, your ideas are going to be just as helpful to solving and thinking about what's happening here as mine are. So I really want you to be participating and putting your comments in the chat if you'd be willing. So thanks. So first off, I want to talk about this concept of the waves and what we're dealing with here. This is a graphic from Marist University, and what it indicates is these are the waves of deaths from the pandemic of 1918, so the Spanish flu. And what you'll notice is that there's distinct peaks as you go through this. Now, what I'll say is I don't know that what we're dealing with now replicates this, but I'd say that it's highly likely that it does, that we're going to see not only one, but maybe two, possibly even three different peaks of this virus as it goes through it. So I'd like us to learn a little lesson from history here. What you can also observe from this graph is that let's call it the second and the third peak there. And again, travel was way different back then, right? But that second and that third peak, if you'll notice, the peak is about half as high as it was the first time around. And there was about a 6-week period between the first one ramping down and the second one ramping up. So that's kind of the timeline and the horizon, again, a long time ago when travel was much more difficult. So when we think about the possibility of another wave hitting us, I just want you to keep this in the back of our head as we go through this, because, you know, I'd like to take you back for a second here to a time long, long ago. So let me just give you the news stories for the day. Brexit happened. So for all of you who are waiting for Brexit to happen, that just kicked in. The impeachment trial is wrapping up, so we'll be nearing the finish line of that too. One more presidential candidate dropped out of the Democratic primaries. Australia's wildfires are burning, and that's certainly a major and very concerning topic. Economy's ticking along just fine. Jobless rates are incredibly low, and I just want you to know that within a month, your entire life will change. A pandemic will destroy your economy. You'll have to make massive budget cuts and change your entire life. So anybody buying that on February 1st? Probably not. I don't think that that's where anybody was at. And so here's this funny thing, which is to say that when we talk about leaning into innovation and we think about the way we've always done it, the way we've always done it happens to be deeply unsafe. And we are just now finding out what that looks like. So that's the danger of what we're up against, is that we can't even remember February 1st now, but yet at the same time, you probably would have laughed me out of the room if I had told you that this was a possibility for what you're dealing with. That means that we can really lean in on some very different thought processes around how we take a look at risk and how we define risk. And so I just want to be very practical about this. You know, in talking with Chris about what this could look like for this group in particular, what I wanted to do was kind of go through a top 10. We're numbers people out here, right? So I tried to break it down into a top 10 because there's a lot of different directions this could go. So I want to walk through this top 10. First of all, we're going to talk about a little bit of redefining risk. Innovation guidelines. What are some quick and dirty things in the field that you can do to allow employees to innovate? We're going to talk a little bit about an innovation fund and how that operates and how to do rapid fire pilot projects. We're going to talk about dealing with failure and what type of failure is okay in this environment and what's not. I want to talk about this concept of recovering. I hate it. So let's talk about something different, which is thriving. There's no reason that recovery should be the goal. There is another goal beyond that that's probably better to aim at. I want to talk through what we did in Colorado Springs in 2008, 2009, when the Great Recession happened, and a technique that we used to establish urgency and crowdsource ideas. Some things we could do to deal with the change management, because this is about accelerating innovation in our organizations, and change management's a big piece of that. I'll talk through the technique of rippling and how we skip ahead and think ahead what might occur, and talk about this concept of plan ahead teams. And I think this is a really great thing that McKinsey put out there. So I want to just run through briefly what that looks like. So let's first of all redefine risk. How's the way we've always done it working for you? Pretty good? Everybody's good on that? Nobody had to stand anything up overnight? You know, I think that's the thing, is here we are, it's actually always been deeply unsafe. It's just now we can actually recognize it. So when I want you to think about risk, I want you to recognize that, you know, the opportunity will be there for you to turtle up back into what we've done or what feels comfortable, because we're trying to return to a normal. And that's why I say the opportunity is not there to recover, but to thrive, right? And push forward on this. So anything that was the way we've always done it just got put to the test, and you just found out how well it worked. It is a good time to use this as an opportunity for us to destroy those things that don't work, that have just been part of what we've always done. And so as leaders in organizations, it's incumbent upon us to really recognize that, hey, this didn't work for us. We may have adjusted. The question is, what do we need to do if there's another wave to get ahead of it? How are we going to make sure that we don't have this? You know, do we make one budget cut now so that we're not trickling in cuts later? Or is that an intentional approach that we want to use? Because if you think about it, there's risk elements in there. So I want you to really be conscious about how you think about risk and how risk gets defined for the organization. Two, I would recommend that right now, unprecedented level of decision-making is having to happen at line level staff, supervisory level staff, they're having to make decisions in the field to be able to deal with an ever-changing situation on the fly. They may not know what it is you want from them when it comes to this. What kinds of innovations are you okay with? What things aren't you okay with? So give them some guidelines to help them understand when they should lean in and when it might not be a good idea to do that right now. Here are 3 that I just put out there as food for thought for you, but do what's appropriate for your organization. First one is, answer the question, does this solve an important problems, and are we the right ones to solve it? If the answer is no to that, and there's a lot of things that the answer is no to on that, that's probably not something we need time and effort being spent on right now. Does this protect the safety of our employees as well as our residents? If it's a no, it's a non-starter. And does this adhere to our organizational values? Again, if you haven't had values conversations in your organizations, good time to dust those off and take a look at those again. But I would encourage you to take a look at it through those 3 lenses and whatever else might be appropriate for you. But please don't leave your staff members without guidance in terms of what's acceptable for them to push forward on, because now they have a relationship with understanding what type of innovation we want. Another technique we can use is an innovation fund. So for those of you who have worked with me in the past, I'm big on innovation funds as a way to mitigate organizational risk. I think that's still true, and especially true right now. But it's a great time to mitigate organizational risk, minimize individual risk, and clarify what success looks like. When you think of innovation for your organization, what does that mean? And it might have a different definition in this crisis than it does ordinarily. So you can define what that looks like. Here's a little bit about how this works, okay? Just some very basic overview. First, keep it simple to apply. If it's hard, people won't do it. You'll see that this is a double-sided, 1-page form, a fillable PDF, all of those types of things. How simple can it be? But it needs to be printable for those who are field staff, generally speaking, right? A fund should not be large. It should not be too large, which may be counter to what most people think, but too large of a fund becomes a workaround for your budget process. The reason the fund is so important right now, let me clarify that, is because liquid dollars are what you need in order to be able to solve an ever-shifting crisis. If we have over-programmed dollars, we have a situation where we're not going to be able to be flexible in that time of crisis. Right now is a time to be able to stand up a small amount of liquid funds to be able to divert where you need to and react in the way that you need to, or be proactive, I should say. This is for pilot projects only to get off the ground, no ongoing funding here. You decide the criteria. So what is it that you think is important for the organization? And it allows for that oversight and allows you to have a selection committee to help you get there. The point of this is that the focus remains on action. It's about helping people get their ideas out, spinning those ideas up, testing those things, and getting them to a pilot phase as quickly as possible so that we can begin testing, building, and breaking ideas. The nice part is, because we're sharing risk, it's a great way for people not to feel individually responsible if something doesn't work as intended. So again, we've minimized the risk for people to innovate. I'm just going to run through the basics of the form here. As you can see, it just has some basic information, titles, project summaries, impact statements. So again, I'm getting very tactical because I find that right now, let's get tactical for a second about how we do some of this stuff. Then we identify things like what resources are needed, right? What's the timeline of the project? Right now, the timeline should be very, very short. Our goal is to get these pilots done quickly. And what other risks and complications you might encounter. You'll notice at the bottom of the form there that we have for committee use scoring. And so the things that, in this case, it would be, is the idea original? Is it impactful? Is it practical? Is it measurable? Is it reproducible? And is it sustainable? Whatever your criteria are, pick those and put them on the form. That way everybody knows what the criteria to be judged by are, right? So again, very simple as a concept. But I also know that paper forms aren't the best way to go about business right now. So what I did was I took all that and I stuffed it inside of this QR code right here. It's a Survey Monkey. If you pull out your phone right now, any smartphone should be able to scan this code and take you immediately to a Survey Monkey link. The link is also listed right there. And you'll get the slides afterwards. But if you're looking for an example of how to do this and do it electronically while everybody's working remote, there you go. Okay, so just wanted you to have an actual free resource. So take a minute. Hopefully your phone automatically scans the code. If you've never heard of a QR code, hugs, lots of hugs. But the link will work, okay? But again, we'll send that out later and make sure that everybody's got that as well. Rapid fire pilot projects. Let's talk about how we do this, right? Pilot projects are about getting action behind ideas. In reality, when we talk about creativity and implementation and how we innovate, the goal here is to spend 90% of our time doing. People get wrapped around the axle and the talking because they want a perfect idea. The point of a pilot project is to get an idea and then learn lessons as you approach the idea, because real life teaches us most of what we need to know in these cases. So it's about getting 90% of our time behind the doing, and that's what the pilot projects can do for us, is get the action behind our ideas. So here's a little bit about how we run effective, quick pilot programs. First of all, we can ask some extreme questions to prepare ourselves. So for example, what if we had to provide, and I want you to think about this in context of a service that you are currently providing that you did not realize you were going to have to. I think many communities are having this sort of unprecedented need, or you had to scale up or scale down a service very rapidly. Well, there's no reason to believe that that won't happen again in the second wave if that's the case. How are you prepared to serve 10,000 residents with this versus one? When you answer the extreme questions, serving one customer is probably how you want it to feel. Serving 10,000 is what you need to solve for. So ask the extreme questions on the pilot program and it'll help you frame it out a little bit. The next part is, because this is a crisis and because it's so rapid and it's changing and it's ever evolving, we need to make it quick to execute. How fast and how small can we make this pilot to get it going quickly? And how do we scale it if we're successful? We have to have a plan to scale. When we do it, we measure 1 to 3 things, that's it. Don't measure more than that. The more administrative burden you place on it, the less likely people are to find a way to be successful with it. So the goal is to get it out, get it tried, get it rolling. Then it's a little bit of lather, rinse, repeat, right? Now we scale it up. If the idea works and we need to scale it again, pilot it larger. If we don't and we're ready to go full throttle with it, right? Find the funding and appropriate. And so this creates a culture of doing. Just as an example, when we ran through these using an innovation fund, 36 ideas were submitted over a 3-year period, 30 were selected and 24 were successful. This is a very different environment, very different time, but just wanted to give you some sense of how funding works, scales, all that kind of stuff. And at the time, the fund that I used or managed in the last case was 50,000 and in the first case was 30,000. So just to give you a size, and 30,000 was Colorado Springs and Adams County was 50,000, if those give you any kind of senses. So you get some senses, we're talking some medium-sized to large-sized communities there. Let's talk about dealing with failure, because that's part of what we have to understand, is that failure is a very different kind of mindset. We're talking about the difference between failure of the heart and failure of the head, and they're very different things. Failure of the heart is never forgivable, or almost never forgivable. It involves embezzlement, doing things that are amoral, right? Things that are wrong to the organization. That type of failure is not okay, and it shows something that's going to be much harder to deal with. So if you encounter that type of failure, big problem. Failure of the head is I made a strategic error on my way to what I was trying to do. If it's somebody who's good at learning, they'll get those lessons quickly. One thing I've learned about innovation is it's a habit, and the formation of the habit itself makes you more confident the next time you have to deal with it. Every single one of you has survived this so far. Whether it was gracefully or begrudgingly or however it came, you've all survived. That means you now have started a habit of knowing how to adapt and deal with hard change. You can keep that habit going. It wasn't what you wanted to deal with, it's what you got to deal with. And that's where we're at, right? So a culture of trying is an innovative culture. That's what we want to encourage. We get people in that mindset, they'll get better and better at it. We fail less and less. We get ahead of things so that we don't have to deal with massive problems. That's what we're after, is to get into this mindset. And right now is the perfect time to do it. And just know that your reaction to failure, or the perception of failure, will guide how your employees behave after this. If you flip out, that will be a problem for you, because nobody's going to want to help you. I don't think I should have to tell you that, but just in case, I just want you to know, please think through how you intend to react when things don't go as planned. But right now, things aren't going as planned. So it's okay that we could go ahead and lean in on some of this, all right? And again, like I said, I'm kind of hating this term, let's recover. Well, how about we skip that and we just go straight to thriving? Like, let's make the hard decisions we've got to make right now. Let's make the budget cut we have to make. Let's activate the emergency fund for anybody who's not out there doing it, right? Let's spin up the grants team. Let's do what we got to do. but let's look to thriving instead of recovering. So let's move that bar, because when we start talking recovery, mentally, we go back to a place of where we currently were, not where we could be. How many meetings have you been to that you no longer go to, that weren't maybe serving value in your life, right? What other things, you know, the thing that I don't know, the payroll team couldn't find a way to do that now they found a way to do, or the IT team couldn't allow the working remote because of security and safety. It's been solved. So many of these things have been solved. So as you've had to do this, can you find a way to elevate the next game so that you're not walking back into where you were, but you're walking in a step ahead? And the other thing is, you know, I've had a lot of folks in a lot of communities that I work with say to me, you know, I think the hardest part, Nick, is that we're having trouble with our employees feeling like this is something that they're a part of, or they don't know how to contribute, or they don't know where they fit in, or it's wearing them down. This isn't what they signed up for. I just want to put this out there just as food for thought. This is a good time for that inspirational voice in you to come out as a leader. If you thought, you know, if you got into government to make a change, that moment is now. Right now. And I think this is a once in a generation, if not once in a lifetime opportunity to restore trust in government. And that's going to happen on a local level. And the local communities that do this are going to thrive. And the ones that don't, they're going to pay a penalty for it. The point here is, I guess, if you have people who want to be in government and want to make a difference, now is their moment, whether this is what they wanted or not. Right now, you can make a meaningful difference where you're at. And if that message doesn't resonate, then we've got a bigger problem there, okay? But for those of us with servant hearts who got into government because we care, this is our moment to step up. Maybe not the moment we wanted, but it's the moment we get. So I encourage us all to step up. And the other thing is, just remember that thriving on the other side of this is gonna require deep empathy. And what I mean by deep empathy is this. You know, ordinarily, when we think of empathy, we think about thinking of somebody who's less fortunate than us, which is one definition, but empathy is the ability to relate to another's feelings. Well, when I ran a survey the other day, and I was, you know, we're talking over 100 people were on this, and I ran the survey, and I asked people how they're experiencing this. The plurality of the people answered that they were having a mildly positive experience. Think about that. So let me just play this out as a second here, okay? We're gonna have citizens who are having mildly positive experiences. What do you think they want from government? Now, let me put this to somebody who's having an incredibly difficult time. They've lost their job. They're potentially losing their home. They've lost their income. You know, they're strapped and had no way out. You know, they've got kids they're looking after. What is it they want from government? Chances are, in the first example, that person wants government to open up as quickly as possible and just restore the services they were used to. I just want to go back to life as normal and let this blip be over. The other person is in need of daily support every single day to get done life, to survive, right? We're going to have to understand all those points of view, and for us and our employees as well. Think about it. Everybody here is having a deeply personal experience by themselves or with their families. So for us to relate to each other, my experience can be radically different than the next person's. So this concept of deep empathy, remembering that people might actually have had a good time, is a part of this. I have a friend who sells for Cisco. And before this, he was doing a lot of hours on the road, and sales weren't all that great. He was struggling a little bit to hit his numbers, and he was away from his kids a lot, which is why he does what he does. And now he's grounded. He's at home with his kids and gets to spend more time with them than he ever has. And WebEx sales have gone through the roof. He's loving it. That's part of his life. I have a buddy who's a pizza delivery man. His life hasn't changed one bit. Radically different lives, okay? So just be thinking that empathy is gonna require us to dial up and dial down and figure out how to do that. And our employees need that help as well as we get there. Sorry, I got a little soapboxy on that one, but I think it's one of those things that we got to plug into as leaders, that this is going to require a different kind of empathy than we've ever gone through before. Another idea is to establish urgency and crowdsource. So this is something that happened to us in Colorado Springs in the 08-09 recession. And here's what we did about it. We faced a $28 million budget shortfall. And that's what we went to the employees with. Part of it was, okay, how do we source ideas for this? at first the idea was, well, we'll get the management team together, we'll get the directors together, and we'll all chat about it. And the reality was, is we came up with a lot of ideas that had already been bandied about before. But you and I all know that there is a layer of management that some ideas just don't penetrate. The ideas don't make it past that, and they need to get to the top. All ideas are on the table now. So what we did was we went and held 4 town halls over the course of 4 days, had over 800 employees attend, and we laid out an urgent question. We have a $28 million shortfall. 160 of you are going to lose your jobs. What ideas do you have for efficiencies? What ideas do you have to change the way that we do business? What ideas do you know, we solicited off of 4 questions around that particular issue of a $28 million shortfall. And we had nearly 800 ideas come in over those 4 days. We took those ideas and worked with a team of folks to consolidate and combine those into a list of 10 ideas that were actionable. 3 of them ended up yielding savings that were nearly 50% of the budget difference that we needed to make up. Ultimately, we saved roughly $13 million from those 3 actionable ideas that came out of 800 and were synthesized to 10 and then turned into 3 that actually made a difference. So we went back to the employees and said, thank you for helping us cut $13 million. 80 of you now lose your jobs. The urgency that was there wasn't false. It was real urgency. So right now, I know we're feeling the budget crunch. I know people understand what this looks like. Establish the urgency of what's occurring here and get the ideas going. You can do this virtually. You could do a town hall virtually to solicit ideas, but please don't sit here and think that you've got to come up with the ideas or do it in the silo. Get your people together and start getting those ideas, but establish the urgency up front. That's how you get people on board with this. And when it comes to change management, think about it this way. What we're after is preparing our team or our troops for radical change. That's what we've got to get them on board with. I like this phrase, you have no FTEs. I think that that's a really great concept to start with. It's funny because I've talked with some communities, and I know Chris and I were talking about this before too, you know, like this happens where people have this mindset, this silo mindset that I've got to protect my police, my fire, my development services, my finance, FTEs. And so how can I minimize my cut? Nope, not right now. You have no FTEs. You have 0 FTEs. And I think the entire organization needs to get on board with the number of FTEs each department has now effectively is 0. And that's the kind of thought process we need to get people prepared with, because we have to make some radical changes. And if we prepare them for that, they're going to be much more accepting that you are being candid and honest on the front end, because that's important. The other thing is people need to be trained in change management. We're not inherently good at it. There are some techniques that can help employees. So if you have access to change management training, please activate that for your employees or start offering it now, because people are struggling. Even people who are good with change are good with making change, not having change inflicted upon them. And there is a big difference, okay? So change management training right now will certainly help you accelerate. And the other thing I'd say is please re-emphasize your EAP programs, your employee assistance programs. Mental health is the next crisis on the other side of this if we're not already starting to experience some of the craziness from this. So please make sure that your employees know what that looks like and that you have those resources available for them, because they may need that help as they try and figure it out. Number 9, nearing the end of the list here, my friends, is rippling, okay? So let's talk about ripples and how we deal with ripples. So we start with an important issue, and then we start asking, then what happens next? Then we do it again and say, then what happens next? Then we say, what needs to happen for the best possible outcome to occur, and what can I do right now to make that happen? So this is a technique that we can use to try and get ahead and see a little bit into the future and start planning for it. So here's an example we can all relate to: toilet paper. Yeah, what a fun crisis, right? Toilet paper sells out. Personally, I did the stand in line at 5 a.m. to go get one of 3 rolls of toilet paper. I knew I should have gone the week before. But you know, the toilet paper sells out. What's next? You know, so ask that question. Important issue. Toilet paper sells out. Then what happens next? Well, I can't get that. So I'm going to get anything like toilet paper, Kleenex, paper towels, baby wipes, right? So they're going to sell out. Then what happens next? Well, if I come in and I can't get toilet paper or Kleenex or baby wipes, what else might I not be able to get? Well, if I can't get baby wipes, I can't get diapers. And if I can't get diapers, I can't get milk or eggs, right? Or produce or chicken or bread. So now other staples, food staples, start to sell out. What do we need to happen? We need people to stop panic buying. That's what we're looking for. And what can we do right now to prevent that from happening? I can limit purchases to 3 items, right? So by asking these what happens next questions, we can try and get ahead and see a little bit into the future and stop it before it happens. If when toilet paper sold out for the first time, they limited it to 3 items right out of the gate, that would not have been a week of news cycles related to panic buying, which made people go panic buy more. If there's a next wave, what can we do to help support our stores in going back to a policy like this so that we don't have to deal with that as a community? Budget risk, something else we're all familiar with, right? Again, the reduced revenues create extreme budgetary risk, and the reducing of our budget risk will be absolutely critical. However, we have an intersecting ripple here, which is that fuel prices, oil prices are at historic lows. Negative $37 a barrel yesterday is what it closed at. So here's what I'd say. If we need to reduce variability in our budget, what's a huge cost for many organizations? Fuel. So can we go through reducing our risk on the fuel cost by locking fuel? Can we look into that? Have we ever done that? Can we partner or regionally purchase fuel if we're in a smaller area? Can we partner with others to be able to do that? And just look at, you know, can we redefine what risk looks like by working regionally as a way to go ahead and solve that problem? But again, can we start bidding with fuel suppliers right now to lock our fuel prices into 2021 so that we're creating budget certainty related to the price? Then all we're dealing with is the variability of the overall consumption, which is a little easier to control, okay? So again, what can we do? That's one thing we can do. And let's take a look at the next wave. So this is where we all get to play in the sandbox a little bit, and I need your help, okay? We got a chat down there. I would love your help in coming up with what happens in the next wave. You know, if you can see that a little bit, the start would be our stay-at-home order ends. People start to congregate again in public places. So what happens next? What happens next? And so I guess I'd just like to see what ripples it is that you see. What is it that you see coming that others might not? Let's just maybe take a minute or two. And if you could just leave comments in the chat, what is it that you see coming other people might not notice or might not see coming? And hopefully we can get a couple comments in the chat. It's been really great to see what folks have come up with. So Chris, because I'm screen sharing right now, I can't actually see the comments coming in. Are we getting anything on the comment side or not so much?
Totally. Oh man, sorry, you don't have the chat.
No. It's just a complication of screen sharing at the same time. So
you just gotta move some of that brush from the Sedona landscape, and then you can get to the chat. Municipal facilities start to reopen. See people starting to start crowding restaurants. Some businesses reopen. Public spaces could be overrun. The virus spreads again. Technology develops to have less required contact in grocery stores, public transit, etc. And a host of others.
Love it. Those are great. And hopefully, Chris, we can scrape the comments too and provide those to folks. I think this is one of the more useful parts too, is to see what everybody else is thinking. And so please, if you have thoughts, leave them here. Don't assume somebody else has thought about that. You know, what is it that it's going to take to go back to work? Are we going to have maintenance cleaning schedules now until we have antibody tests? Is it that we have to show proof of vaccination? Is that part of what it's going to be? You know, like we have a very different kind of normal coming up here, and hopefully it's ahead of where we were if we make some intentional effort now, as opposed to, again, let's restore or return to the way things were. You know, very dangerous thought process. So thanks. Keep those comments coming. Really appreciate those thoughts. And you know, I had one group that was talking about the need for public protection on buses. You know, who's going to want to take public transit now? If I run that risk, is it something where purchasing PPE for people who ride transit is actually cheaper than discontinuing transit, or does that actually have to be looked at? That's a difficult conversation because of all the ramifications, but think about that. You know, we got to plan for those kinds of things. We could see ahead. What about hazard pay? About half the communities I know are doing hazard pay, half are not. What's that look like? So be thinking those things through. Think about that next wave though. And plan ahead teams. You know, I love this concept. This is McKinsey that came up with this. This is, I think, a great share that Chris has put out there, and really love what they're doing. But here's how it works, is to have a team that's dedicated to looking ahead. So it's finding the future and planning for it. And what they advocate for is focusing on 5 different timelines. So the 5 timelines that you're looking for is what needs to happen this week for us to be successful? What needs to happen 2 to 4 weeks out? What needs to happen 1 to 2 quarters out? Then 1 to 2 years out? And then what's the new normal end up looking like? So we should have teams examining all 5 of those paradigms that are then reporting back into the teams that are currently working on the COVID crisis right now. So the teams in our organizations, our emergency planning, our senior leadership groups, we need a group of people out there looking to the future and helping to provide us with that, so that we've got a group dedicated to rippling ahead and start prepping now. Their goal is to help you see what the broad future looks like, not to know the specifics of everything, but to at least have enough of the flavor that you can get your resources and your planning in the right spaces. And so it's a really great way to start prepping now. So this is a great way for you to activate maybe some underutilized people right now, or some of your top talent, those folks you know who are incredibly creative. Tap them for this. Here's what their graphic looks like, which I really appreciate. So you can see here on the one side of the screen, we've got that crisis team, which I think is a lot of what those of us have stood up before. In this sort of look ahead module, what you have is a plan ahead team and a crisis team. And the planning team actually reports into the crisis team about the work that they're doing as things go on. So just in terms of context, keep your working group that you've got dealing with things right now that are right in front of you, but consider adding this forward-looking element that helps to inform the decision-making that your crisis team is doing. So I really love this as a concept. It's certainly all about leaning in, and it certainly can help utilize maybe some of your talented people, some of your creative people, and give them something to do. If you use StrengthsFinder, anybody who's got futuristic or ideation on their chart, this is a great time to activate them in this capacity right now. And so that's what I got for you. That's my top 10, y'all. So I'd love to hear any and all questions that you've got. And that's pretty much where I'm at.
Wow. Incredible. And credit.
So, sound effects, because why not?
Do people have, if you have questions, certainly list them in the chat or take yourself off mute for Nick, and we'll leave this here for a little bit. Nick, do you have questions for the audience, like things that you're thinking about that you'd be interested in, what people are working on?
I mean, I'd love to hear, since we've got people who are, prepping for this or doing this, I'd love to hear where they're landing on the financial moves right now. Like what's top of the list for them? Is it cataloging services? Is it making the cuts? Is it, prepping? So for me, that would be of interest, but here for you.
Sure, I'll jump in. In St. Albert, we've been spending a lot of time using our PBB data and using it in a business continuity context. So as staff start to get sick, or as we start dropping programs and services, how might we redeploy those resources elsewhere in the organization? So that's something we've been focused on, or our EOC team has been focused on since the pandemic started.
Well, I'm glad you're taking a look at that, Paul. It's great. I mean, not great, but necessary. How about that? Better said. Nice to have access to that data too. I remember coming out of the 08-09 crisis, we started to do program-based budgeting in Colorado Springs for the first time. And I know Nina, who's on the call too, has had some experience with the repercussions of that as well, but it was crazy to not have that information at the time when you needed it, which in 08-09, we certainly did not have any of that. So, it's great to have that information looking at this now proactively.
Nick, a question was, in your experience of creating an innovation fund, do you have a Goldilocks level of fund size either as representation of percent of total budget or total dollar amount? What's your thinking on that front?
I would say never more than 100,000. Really, even in the largest, I mean, very, very large organizations, maybe you're talking a New York City, you know, top 10 city size. I would say never more than $100,000 and never less than 20. And the reason I say cap it at 20 is because part of what you're trying to indicate is a seriousness and a commitment to the employee ideas. The best part about an innovation fund is that if you don't use it because there aren't ideas or the ideas aren't worthy of being funded, right? You don't pay. So, you know, I can say that out of 3 years with the $50,000 fund, the average funding we did was $36,000. We just had 50,000 available. So that's the upside of that too, is that it really is sort of a pocket of money that allows you to, you know, plan a little bit of savings in many times. So yeah, I would say anywhere between, you know, 20, I would say 30 to 50, 30 to 75 is probably ideal depending on your organization size, but 20 to 100, and I would not go above that. I saw 2 different organizations that I know that did, you know, 200 some plus $1,000 funds, and everybody lined up to get their next pet project funded. So that I would not recommend that.
Another question came in. What advice did you have to go from 800 ideas and sluice them down to 3?
Yep. So that was an intense process. So what we did was literally transcribed in exact terminology the 800 ideas. So we took them off the large paper, got them into an Excel spreadsheet, and then started categorizing the ideas by content or type. So there were several themes that emerged. So it was really evident that you could see some themes emerge after a period of time. It wasn't like they were 797 absolutely unique ideas. It was, you know, the same thing, like, I wish we had 3-man fire trucks instead of 4-man fire trucks type stuff, right? So you only need that cataloged once, but then there's 40 people that voted for it. So we did a modified bang the table, vote up, vote down type approach on it to a certain degree. But we were able to get to a list of about 30 pretty quickly just based on culling that list down. Then we took those to a group of senior leaders and said, which of these are 100% out? You know, there's just literally only legally or whatever, there's no way to make this happen. And that actually cut about 10 off the list. And so we were left with 20. We got it to 10 and we had a working team that got it to 10 and put ideas and thought processes around action. So then it was, out of these 20, what 10 do we recommend taking a look at for limited resource purposes? And what does action steps look like for us behind those 10 ideas? And then went back and went through every single one with directors and the senior leadership team and went through every single one and poked on, why is this not viable? Why could we not do this? And what could we do to make this idea work? And like I said, I think it was probably like 7 of them ended up actually occurring, but 3 of them were the majority of the cost savings. That 13 million number I said, all came from really 3 big ideas. And the other ones were just to change the way we did business that seemed to work a lot better.
A related question was, who did you have as part of the committee that reviewed the innovation request? Do you have any suggestions on that front to consider?
Yeah, so when we talk innovation fund requests, ordinarily what I'll do is have a group that have run through an innovation academy. I encourage people to at least train their employees on what they want from an innovation perspective. And so for me, I trained the employees on what innovation looks like and spent time with them over the course of months, helping them understand that. So I would say at least give a baseline of what that looks like and have employees go through some standardized level of training around the concept so that they have a common language to work from. It doesn't need to be a ton of ongoing work if it doesn't have to be. Of course, that's preferred because we want them to have a deep basis of understanding, but take a group of folks, run them through something that says, this is what it's like in my community. This is what we want innovation to look like, and put them through some training. Then that's the way to get on the committee. Is they go through the training, then they can replace people who want to step off. And we have now a pipeline of people who are capable of stepping in and stepping onto a committee like that. And it really became very quickly an honor to be on the committee, and people loved being a part of it because they heard these cool, crazy ideas, were able to help others do their stuff. So, but that would be my thing, is it should be cross-departmental. and they should all have a common basis of understanding for what that looks like. And you should have at least one senior, you know, one director level person, one senior level assistant city manager, assistant county manager type on the committee. And not, if you, you know, if you need the city manager, the county manager to kick it off, definitely go there. They need to be part of the supporting effort, but they shouldn't be on the committee just by default, because people will feel nervous around that individual. Just because they're the top in the organization, even if it's an assistant, that'll probably help blunt some of the concern that people have about having their idea, but you need a senior level advocate to be there. Yep.
Your fuel example was really solid. And it connects the dots to one of your earlier points about seeing this as an opportunity to view the budget differently, view everything differently, and imagining what else is happening in the world and where are the opportunities that you can take advantage of. That to me seems like very much fits in with your plan ahead team. It's a creative exercise. Are you doing some of that work? I'm kind of curious, like with other organizations, just trying to get them into that headspace that's not, oh man, we're in panic, it's stressful, moving over to, well, what are the opportunities program by program or within every line item?
I've definitely had a few opportunities, but this is an interesting space. You know, it's funny because the principles of innovation now more than ever are completely relevant. You know, this is why we've been talking about the fact that the way we've been doing business is deeply unsafe. And so I find a lot of the communities that have already stepped into this space are planning and preparing and doing a lot better. And then just pinging ideas. I've seen some really cool ideas from some people who are folks that I've worked with in the past. And that's been exciting and invigorating to me, you know, as I want to directly help, but it's hard to do. So I've been doing a lot of coaching with different communities, and, you know, anybody I've ever worked with or anybody on this call for that matter, if you've got something you want to bang around, give me a ring. I'm happy to help you get where you're looking to go on this. And there are 3 communities now that I've worked with specifically on some of the things that they're doing so they can get ahead. So that's been really fun in terms of leading them through some exercises to think it through. So, but yeah, you know, this is a very different space, and I think the thing right now is the goal is to calm it down, because it is so scary. It's just to calm it down and get to a place where we see what the future, start planning for it, be methodical, get ahead of this, but imbue this mindset that change, you know, is inevitable, but progress is an option into our workforce right now, you know? So yes, I'm borrowing old cliches, but you know, I saw it on a fortune cookie and I loved it, you know? It also, yeah, it also said my lucky number is 11. So that was good advice as well.
Awesome. Please, everyone, keep your questions coming. Otherwise, I'll dominate it. But I like to keep, I've got 10 more minutes with Nick Kittle. This Friday, we're doing a program mapping webinar. Eric Keck's going to lead it. Eric, as a city manager, was successful with creating partnerships, local government to local government. And in terms of one of your points, you talked about asking extreme questions, and you also had that slide that showed the second wave and the severity was potentially so much bigger. We're thinking about extreme questions that make regional partnerships far more attractive than maybe they have been in the past. And not only local government to local government, but local government to private sector, your local businesses, nonprofits who are maybe hurting right now, but might be able to be a great partner in some way, shape, or form. I don't know. I was interested in what some of your extreme questions might be around that, around partnerships in general and cross-sector collaboration.
Yeah, it's a good question, Chris. I mean, I think so. Some of the questions that would pop into my mind of that is, you know, what happens if our partner ultimately fails, right? Their complete inability to provide the service that we might be contracting with them for, right? Or what service could I completely remove because I've outsourced that service potentially, right? Or, you know, we did some cool partnerships with our utilities. There were some ways that we were limited in terms of how that worked. Springfield Township in Ohio is doing some fun stuff in terms, they have an economic development fund that's got some very special rules around it, but part of it was about sponsoring and getting employees, about supporting local business development. So they went out and took portions of that fund, bought gift cards from downtown businesses at full price and offered them up to residents at half price. That's one of the intended purposes of the fund, but now they've partnered, the private businesses are all in. They found a way to help shore up their small mom and pop businesses in their downtown. They've used the fund for its intended stated purpose. So I think it's a really good time to also, you know, explore what are the other funding things that we can do to make this viable. Because I think we get locked in a lot of channels around how we fund certain things. So, you know, to my mind, it would be, what if we fail? What if this is wildly successful? What does that look like? You know, what does wild success with a regional fleet operation look like? You know, I don't know, but access to more fueling locations, you know. So to my mind, it's thinking through some of those things.
That's exciting. Steve, I was going to ask you, you had a question that you were formulating, and if you wouldn't mind coming off mute.
Sure. So you mentioned the average innovation fund award was 36,000. I'm thinking a lot of those ideas or changes did not require any sort of change in like personnel. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of budget in there. So I'm curious where the dollars would go, if that was empowering to people that we did it without personnel, if that was just a necessity based on that award bracket of 20 to 100,000, or how that kind of balanced back.
Yeah, good question. So the way that we kind of rolled with it in our case, so it was 36,000. Typically we had somewhere between 5 to 7 ideas get funded, something in that neck of the woods. You know, ended up totaling 36,000. So you could hire for an FTE, you could not hire an FTE, but you could hire a temp or an intern or do something that was temporary. All people had to be less than a year. So we just made sure that you couldn't hire 5 additional staff members, but you could go out and get 2 interns and pay them $12 an hour to do it. So part of it was just setting up some rules. Everything was pilots only. There is no ongoing funding, no funding year over year, to keep it clean from an accounting perspective and to make it simple. The other thing is that people, when they innovate in this space, want to know that there's an end to their required involvement, which is something that tends to hold people back. It's like, well, I don't know if you've got any never-ending committees, but everybody seems to, right? And they don't want to get stuck on that. So I don't want to get on the treadmill of having to keep running this project. So we'd put an end date out over 1 year, do what you need to do to get this project off the ground. But it was also about you doing your idea and our office supporting it. Probably the easiest thing we did was, the best thing we did was getting our finance and accounting team to understand the intent behind this so that they could simplify the red tape piece of it. That was by far and away the biggest impediment to people wanting to innovate, was having to deal with finance. It's just straight up. The fact of the matter is, if I have $6,000 to spend and now I have to go and code all of my line items to 12 different accounts and I'm a guy in public works, yeah, why don't you all go do that? I think I'll just not bring forward my idea, right? So what we did was found a way to give people 1 account line item for this and a card that they could use that only was authorized to that amount, so that we could have reasonable checks and balances in place. We had finance team members that were there to help them get through, so they had a direct conduit. But I just know that that was the biggest barrier for most people to wanting to do it, was having to deal with the finance regulations around it. So whatever you could do to simplify that. But yeah, no ongoing FTEs, no staff, and this thing cuts off at 1 year. And if you want that thing to get funded beyond that, go through the budget appropriation process. And if it's successful, we'll help support you do that.
Do you think that it stops? Did you see projects get done that didn't require funding? So like, do you think that if you did not have that $20,000 carrot, people would just walk away and be like, I know you said it was important to give something that was substantial and commitment, but like, could that be commitment be in kind? I will advocate for your I will take this in front of our city council. Or does it have to be a dollar amount?
I find that, you know, just from a budgetary perspective and having worked in government like all of you, you know, I spent 15 years there. You and I know that what gets funded matters. And I think that's the thing, is it's a signaling move, that they're serious about it. I think organizations, in my experience, Steve, have launched efforts related to employee ideas before, but put no money behind it. And the employees, I think, take on a sour taste in their mouth of, oh, great, more lip service from leaders on this, as opposed to, wait a second, they put $20,000 into a fund to get ideas off the ground. So I would say that I have experienced definitely the ability to get ideas out of people without any funding. And I like it because it makes people hungry. You know what I mean? Like there's a real drive that goes into that if you're working with somebody's passion. If it's just an idea that I'm kind of okay about, it won't go anywhere in my experience. And if you have funding behind it, you can get a lot more of those off the ground. But what was cool about that is, one, the morale numbers were through the roof for the people who participated in the fund. Their morale numbers went through the roof because they could point to something they actually accomplished. They recruited people for the next round of the funding itself, and they kept doing and mentoring and helping others after they were done, just because they were so proud of doing it. And I think that to me was almost as exciting as some of the ideas that came out, which were really cool ideas. So hard to put a value to morale.
I was chuckling because I was like, maybe you should name names. We'll take a list, call those people out.
So Bob, yeah. Yeah. So it's a great question, but I think the thing is it really created a motivational tool to keep people going, and people who got plugged into the program kept staying plugged into the program. They felt like they could leave when they needed to. So they didn't feel like they were on a never ending treadmill. They could accomplish something that they could point to, that they could measure, and that was meaningful and set them up for success in their career. So some cool stuff as a side effect there. And I know we're almost out of time, Chris, so I'll turn it back over to you.
Time for one more question. If anybody has one from the audience, chat or off mute.
Can I offer up one more thing, Chris?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing a group called What If Wednesdays. If anybody's got an interest, it's every week I'm doing a 30-minute chat. It's free to register. And all it is basically we talk about a timely topic for 30 minutes. We teach for 20, and then we crowdsource and work together for the next 10. So if you got an interest, this week's topic, tomorrow's topic is about building pockets of positivity. So if you're looking to understand what building positivity back in your workforce culture looks like right now, that's what we'll be tackling tomorrow. But I'm only doing them through the end of May just to keep tackling topics as they're timely. So if you got 30 minutes, join me tomorrow.
Very cool. Very cool. And Nick, where do they go? Do they just Google Nick Kittle What If Wednesday, or do they go to Sustainavation? Do you have your?
I'll type in the. Yeah, I'll just go to sustainavation.us. I'll just type it into the web right there.
Cool.
Yeah, you can just type that in, and there's a free registration link on the events page.
Very cool. Well, Nick, thank you so much, and thanks everybody for joining us. These were great ideas, and just the philosophy or the headspace of being innovative, like you're talking about. I don't know, I'm leaving with a lot of positive things to think about. So please, everybody, if you get a chance to connect with Nick as you're starting to get creative and think your way through this and create your teams, please do. For us, our next session is this Friday, and it's Eric Keck, who's got he's live from Switzerland in that picture in your top left of your video. And we'll be talking about the extreme question of what do regional partnerships look like? How do you start to look at programmatic partnerships in a different way? That's my kid outside, and she was like, "Is Nick Kittle still on the phone? I really want to talk to him."
But mine's saying the same thing, Chris.
Yeah. Hopefully you have a chance to join us. But thank you so much, everybody. Really enjoyed the session, Nick. Thanks a lot. Yeah, virtual applause.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Bye, Nolan.